friends, Father Frank Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to our program. You know, one of our best friends in the pro-life movement is the Susan B. Anthony List. And some years ago, they began a research division called the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Our friend and colleague Chuck Donovan and others make that resource available to the entire pro-life movement. And today, we're going to talk with one of the associate scholars at the Charlotte Lozier Institute. We're very happy to have with us Dr. Kathi Aultman. Now, she is a board-certified OBGYN and has been a fellow of the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, as well as a member of APLOG, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. And she has had quite a bit of experience that we're going to talk with her about today. She has also performed abortions in the past, something of which, of course, she has turned away from, and she's going to explain to us some of the reasons for that and the journey that she has made. But Dr. Aultman, thank you so much for being with us today on the program.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a great pleasure and honor to be on your show.
You know, you shared your story in a very compelling way at the 2019 March for Life, and I was there at the Rose Dinner, of course, in which you spoke extensively about it. I think that was very well received. Was that a good experience for you as well?
Yes, much more pleasant than testifying.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's go back a little bit, and I know that our viewers will be and our listeners very interested in your story. You, of course, our medical doctor, and obstetrics and gynecology is something that is so important, especially in this day and age as we try to build a culture of life. But you were involved in abortions. Tell us a little bit about that, how you got involved and how much you were involved in the abortion industry.
Well, most people don't realize that all OBGYNs are taught to do abortions unless they opt out because of reasons of conscience. And 85% of OBs do not do abortions, but most of them were actually trained in them. And so when I went to medical school and then on to my residency program, I really believed that abortion was a woman's right. And so I had no qualms about learning how to do abortions. As a matter of fact, I wanted to. And not only did I learn how to do the first trimester section abortions, I also sought out additional training in second trimester D&E abortions, or dismemberment abortions.
And that, of course, is getting a lot of attention in these days, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But the point you just made is something that I point out to people as well, and I'd like you to explain it for our audience just a little bit more. The procedure that is used in the first trimester abortion, the suction and curettage, isn't it true to say that that is involving certain techniques that are also done under perfectly legitimate circumstances, morally speaking, when you may have to suction out or take out of the uterus some other kind of tissue, or perhaps a baby has died naturally and needs to be removed. So in terms of what you're saying, I mean, a doctor is going to be trained in the technique and the instruments used, and of course the difference with abortion is going to be, among other things, I presume, that now you're talking about a living child rather than a non-living tissue.
Correct. There are actually two different things. There's a regular dilation and curettage where you just use a little metal instrument to scrape the inside of the uterus if a woman has abnormal bleeding or some sort of gynecological problem. Then we would do a D&C, just a plain D&C.
Right.
If a woman has had a miscarriage, so the baby is dead, there's no viable tissue there, then one would do a suction curettage, or a D&C with suction. And in that case, after dilating the cervix, which is also done in the regular D&C, but after dilating the cervix, one would insert a plastic tube attached to suction and suction out whatever was in there, and then possibly take a metal curette and just check the lining to make sure everything is gone.
Yes, yes. So then, what would be the difference then between that and a first trimester abortion? I mean, aside from the fact that the baby is obviously alive.
Nothing.
Okay. So
same procedure.
And that's when we hear about the effort to in some places to pressure medical students to learn abortion and whatnot. I've often pointed out to people that really what the other side is aiming at here is desensitizing the conscience, because they're going to be familiar with the instruments, they're going to be familiar with the techniques, they're going to be familiar with the way the mother's body is behaving in those particular circumstances. But the line that one crosses, of course, is that moral line of conscience of desensitizing oneself to actually taking a human life. What was that experience like for you? Did you see yourself just becoming more and more deaf to the call of conscience, if you will? I remember, for example, a number of doctors that I've worked with over the years, helping them to transition out of the abortion industry, would say things to me like, it was like a hot poker the first time that I did an abortion, or the first time even that I witnessed one. It was a hot poker on my heart. But then as time went on, it hurt a little bit less and a little bit less. And it was a process really of dehumanization. Tell us about that from your own experience.
I think for me that process started earlier because I had an abortion, and so I think that by the time I got to my residency program, it didn't bother me at all. I had already categorized the fetus as non-human.
Yes.
And so that I really didn't feel, it's terrible to say, but I really didn't feel bad about it. I was so focused on the fact that it was a woman's right and I was helping these women that I wasn't looking at the fetus as a baby or as a human being.
Yes.
I think the other thing that happens to physicians when they're in training, I think during medical school, we are learning so much information that I don't know how much we question what we're learning.
Right.
We're just trying to cram it all in, and it actually is, I think, somewhat easy for the school or whatever, the program, to condition the student to compartmentalize things. We have to hurt people a lot of times in order to help them.
Right.
Compartmentalization, and then to go from hurting people to killing people maybe isn't quite as far a jump, but I agree that once you do an abortion, doing other things that might conflict with your conscience is much easier. And I think it's very dangerous when we have our physicians in the position of killing us, because there may come a time when we don't want them to kill us.
Exactly. Well, for our audience that are maybe just joining us, this is Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life, and we're talking with Dr. Kathi Aultman today, who, as we will learn as our interview goes on, is doing a great service to the pro-life movement throughout our country. She was, however, for a time involved in abortions, and we're talking a little bit about how that experience was for her and how her transition happened into the pro-life arena. So, Dr. Aultman, let's talk about these second trimester abortions, these dismemberment procedures. You were also involved in performing them. Remind our audience how those procedures are carried out.
Well, in that case, about 2 days before the procedure, the patient has to come in and have preparations made to dilate their cervix. And what we do is, or what I used to do, is put laminaria or some other material in the cervix that dilates over time, so that the cervix can slowly be dilated over the course of a day or two, so that it can be opened large enough in order to insert the size cannulas that are necessary and the instruments that are necessary to actually do the abortion and remove the fetus.
Mm-hmm.
And then once, so when the patient comes back for the actual procedure, then those are removed, and the suction curette, which is a hollow tube attached to a suction, is inserted, and the fluid is withdrawn, and then clamps are inserted to grab whatever one can grab, usually an arm or a leg. Those are removed, and then an attempt is made to grasp the thorax and crush it and remove it, and then to grasp the head and remove it, and the placenta, and then the suction cannula is reintroduced once you think you have everything, and the cavity is suctioned to remove any additional bits and pieces, and then the physician would look and make sure that all the parts were there. You literally have to piece the baby back together again to make sure you. And then they might check with a sharp curette, but then all the instruments would be removed, and that would be the end of the procedure. Oftentimes, you would give something to make the uterus contract.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, excuse me. Sorry, my husband just pulled up in his tractor.
That's okay. So Dr. Aultman, let me ask you this. These are questions that people will often ask about these procedures. First of all, as you're explaining, dismemberment, obviously the pieces of the baby's body are being torn apart. When that begins, when that process begins, when the first limb is acquired, first of all, are you doing that under ultrasound guidance, or are you just doing it blindly and feeling your way into the womb?
When I was doing them, we did not do them under ultrasound guidance. That is possible now, but back when I was doing them, we didn't use that technique.
And the other question people wonder is the baby alive when you're grabbing that first arm or leg or whatever is grabbed first? Is the baby alive as his or her body is being torn limb from limb?
Yes, unless nowadays there's a procedure where you can go in and kill the baby first, either with digoxin or potassium chloride.
Right.
But they can also be done without taking that additional step. And until the baby loses enough blood, the baby's alive.
Yes. Well, you are certainly courageous in sharing these things, and it's certainly so helpful and impactful for people because, as I always say, America will not reject abortion until America sees abortion. And part of seeing abortion is simply knowing the step-by-step procedures, as you have described both of these types of abortions, the suction curettage and the dismemberment. But now tell us the good news about how you came on a journey of ultimately rejecting abortion and actually becoming pro-life. You shared it beautifully at the March for Life at the Rose Dinner, and you identified, I recall, several elements that really worked on your own mind and heart to cause you to change. Tell us about that today.
I think the first thing that happened was I had a baby, and I had continued doing abortions even when I was pregnant and didn't think anything about it because my baby was wanted. That was the difference for me.
Yes.
Was the baby wanted or unwanted? But then after I had my baby and I tried to go back and do abortions, I found that I couldn't keep going. At that point, the baby being unwanted was no longer enough for me to do the abortion.
Yes.
So I stopped doing abortions myself. Then, as I was in my practice, I realized that I had all of these young women who had unplanned pregnancies but decided to keep their pregnancies, and they were doing really well. And then I had other women who had made the choice to have abortions, and they were not doing well. Oftentimes they were seeing psychiatrists. And this didn't jive with the feminist rhetoric that I had embraced. I thought that, having an unplanned pregnancy was the worst thing that could happen to you, and that if you had the baby and didn't want it, or for a young woman, this would ruin her life. And that didn't pan out in my practice. And then the final thing was, and this is awful, but actually I continued to do abortions I didn't continue to do abortions, but at the time I was doing abortions, I was not a Christian.
Right.
After I stopped, a few years later, I did become a Christian, but I still continued to believe in abortion. I believed it was a woman's right, and that even though I didn't want to do them, they had the right to have them.
Yes.
The final change was when a Christian friend lovingly approached me and said, I know you feel really strongly in your beliefs, but would you read this article? And I wasn't able to share this at the Rose Dinner because it's not politically correct.
Okay.
But what actually happened was this article compared abortion to the Holocaust.
Yes.
And my father was was with the group that that liberated the very first concentration camp.
Really?
And so I grew up with all of those pictures and the stories, and I could never understand when I became a physician how the German doctors could do the terrible things that they did.
Yes.
Well, when I read that story, I realized that I was just as bad as the Nazi doctors doing those experiments. And I realized that the reason was that I didn't consider the fetus human, so I had no moral compunction about doing the abortions. And that was the point when I realized that I was a mass murderer. And
Wow.
And it took a lot of prayer and a lot of healing to get past that.
My goodness. Thank God that we have salvation and a God who forgives, but that is a powerful testimony. Again, thank you for sharing that. I want to delve a little bit more into something here, but let me tell our audience that may be just joining us. You're listening to Dr. Kathi Aultman, whom we're interviewing here today. She's an associate scholar with the Charlotte Lozier Institute, a pro-life research entity, part of the Susan B. Anthony list, and good friends and colleagues of ours. And I'm Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life. And brothers and sisters, this testimony that Dr. Aultman is sharing with us today is something that is shared by many other people whose paths have been different, everyone unique, and yet very many common elements. Dr. Aultman, as you may know, over the years I've been privileged to work with Dr. Philip Ney, who developed the Society of Centurions, the healing program for doctors who have been involved in abortion and who for various reasons, many different kinds of reasons, have stopped that practice and now seek to walk that path of healing, which is really a lifelong path, a difficult path, and yet one that brings also so much peace and consolation as we more and more grow into the person God wants us to be. And as you were talking, I heard a lot of echoes of people I've worked with, like Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who co-founded the abortion industry, and Norma McCorvey, the Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade, whom I was privileged to guide and ultimately receive into the Catholic Church, and so many other people. I work closely with Abby Johnson, and so many folks who, having had various kinds of involvement in the abortion industry, some as doctors, some as just assistants or advocates, all of whom, however, have found that there is a path to hope and to healing, and also who have found something that I know you have found and that I'd like you to share a little bit about, which is they have found that they too, even after having been involved with the killing of many, many babies, they too can participate now in the saving of lives. And I know you are doing that. I want to ask you about your work in testifying in various contexts for the defense of pro-life laws. I know you were involved in giving some testimony in upholding the ban on partial birth abortions that has been in effect in our country, and as well as at the present time, there are laws, for example, prohibiting the kind of dismemberment abortion procedures that you described and that you once participated in, and others that are trying to protect babies in the later stages of pregnancy because of their ability to feel pain. Tell us about some of your activities and experiences in providing expert testimony to defend and pass such laws.
Well, after I realized I was a mass murderer, and after I'd had some healing, I just asked God if He could use me, and I answered an email asking if anyone was willing to go to Washington to testify on partial birth abortion. That didn't work out, but subsequently I ended up testifying in Florida and then multiple other states before the legislatures, and then actually in court defending the partial birth abortion bans. Mm-hmm. And then all that sort of settled down, and I didn't do anything for close to 20 years. And then I ended up having to retire from my practice because I became allergic to everything. And that was very discouraging me. But after about a year of healing, I asked God to allow me to continue to do something important. And I got a call out of the blue to go and testify in Washington again. And I, excuse me, and I think it was on the pain-capable bill.
Yes.
And that would prevent abortion at about 20 weeks when the baby can feel pain. And then it was just Dr. Donovan. Dr. Donovan. I'm sorry, Dr. Prentice. Convinced me to join the Charlotte Lozier Institute.
Yes.
And I just began testifying in state after state after state, and have testified on the heartbeat bills, the dismemberment bills, and the pain-capable bills.
These testimonies are so important. As you say, it's not quite as easy as interviews like this, and sometimes you face hostile questioning and so on. But we're, it's so reliant as a movement, and the pro-life legislators rely so much on experts like yourself who can not only talk about these things from a medical perspective, but also from the firsthand experience that you bring to these questions. So I'm grateful for your efforts in doing that, and we're seeing such a great deal of progress in regard to these laws on the state level, and of course, as we know, in the U.S. Congress, the bill has been introduced again to protect babies from the dismemberment abortions, and we certainly hope that this is able to move forward. Well, you know, thank you for sharing all of this today. I look forward to keeping in contact with you as time goes on, and we see our country become more and more aware, especially of late-term abortions, and more and more active in working to protect these babies. So, Dr. Aultman, thank you very much, and God bless you for your journey and for sharing so much with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for allowing me to do it.
And we will talk to you again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Well, brothers and sisters, you've been hearing Dr. Kathi Aultman, and check out the Charlotte Lozier Institute and many good resources from this organization and research for the pro-life movement that both legislators and pro-life activists at every level are able to use. We'll continue to make this available to you here online and in more of our future programs. Father Frank Pavone here, Director of Priests for Life. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.
But you know what? When you and I take up this call and we talk about abortion, if we speak about it in church, we're told we're too political. If we speak about it in the political arena, we're told we're too religious. If we speak about it in the world of the media, it's too disturbing. In the world of business, it's too distracting. In the world of education, it's too controversial. In the streets, it's too disruptive. So abortion, if abortion is wrong, where do we go to say so? We go into the churches, we go into politics, into the media, into business, into education, and into the streets. Some churches haven't wanted to get involved in political hassles with the government, so they've been silent on abortion. They didn't want to get involved in hassles from the government. They didn't want to take the fight to the government.